Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. And today's finally the day because you can see the pile load of parts in the front of my Mercedes. I'm finally swapping over all the crusty bushings, old arms for some new high performance suspension. And I hate to say it, but that was the last air out you guys will ever see on this car. I'm finally swapping over my air suspension to an actual full-on coilover setup. But before I proceed and start tearing the car down, I decided to actually take off just the bags and swap over the front coils, my KWV3s that were built, and these adjustable springs instead of my bags, because I want to have a baseline for this car on how the car feels, how it handles. And I'm really curious if the rear end is going to be as soft as it was before, or if the springs will actually stiffen it up by a lot. Because my predicament is that the bushings are so old that there's no resistance in the suspension besides the actual bags themselves and the shocks that I have from the E36. So yeah, whenever I get my baseline and whenever I get the feel for the car, I'm gonna take everything out of the car. Probably going to start with the front because that's the easiest. Take off the sway bars, the links, control arms, everything like that, and then move on to the rear. But before we continue, let's go ahead and talk about the parts that I have. So the obvious ones are the control arms, there's the rear ones, the front ones. The rear ones are actually from a W124 E300, I believe. They looked identical, so I just decided to get those ones because those were cheaper. I got Silver Project rear toe arms that are adjustable. YSR rear adjustable springs with the purchase. This right here is the roll center adjuster. I'll put up some pictures on the screen to show you what they do exactly. Pretty much your control arm is supposed to sit like this, but since my car is lowered, it sits like this. And to fix it, and this bracket is supposed to go on top like this, and then the control arm will sit like this. And I also have these sway bar front brackets that usually tend to snap in half, which I personally think it's a user error. But we'll see how these handle. If these snap again, I'm going to order another pair and stiffen them up by welding a bracket on both sides to make them much stiffer. But this sway bar alone should really stiffen up the front, and it really shouldn't roll that much compared to how it does right now. And I also have some H&R sway bars from Germany. This one I believe is a 28mm, and the rear one I believe was a 22. And then of course I have my KWV3 coilovers, 3-way adjustable. I ended up rebuilding them completely just because all of this was corroded, so I got new bump knobs, top adjustable ones. I have a new spring perch on both sides. Now, one thing I'm not a huge fan of these coilovers is usually coilovers will have a cup on the bottom that's adjustable to adjust the actual height of the car. So there's a small chance that these might not work with my setup. And I also have some IRP adjustable camber and caster arms from an E36 as well that these coilovers came with, but there's a good chance I'm not going to use these just because the holes don't line up. But they were seized up before, but actually got the ball to free up and it moves very freely. So I will most likely sell these ones. And I've got my other arms. I'm not exactly sure what those ones are. I do also have Silver Project camber arms that are already installed in the car. And I do have rear coilovers that are also already installed from an E36. And up here I have all new hardware. And here we have a bunch of polyurethane and Delrin bushings for my suspension. These are for the control arms right here. These ones are for the camber arms. These are for the outer bushing carrier, I believe. Not exactly sure. This is for the subframe, and so are these ones. These I'm not exactly sure what these are for. I'd have to look it up, which looks like these are the rear spring perch bushings. So not exactly sure what the hell these are for. And then I got my grease. I don't know if I'll have enough. I'll have to get another tube, but this will do for now. And right over there, I have my wheel bearings. I'm going to rebuild all 4 corners. This is the rear e-brake shoe kit, and then this right here are the bushings that go right there. But let's go ahead and air up the car and start tearing down the front to replace the coilovers. And if I'm not too happy with how these fit, I might sell them and then get some custom BC Racing ones or something along those lines to where I can actually adjust the height of the car and not just the spring right here. Which, I mean, I could probably get some stiffer Swift springs and maybe remove the helper one. I don't know. Still have to figure that out. And of course, the downside, whenever I'm running this exact setup, I pretty much have to air up the front as much as I can because the wheel wells on these things are tiny. But whenever the engine swap is going to happen, I'm going to cut my wheel wells off completely and weld in some new bigger ones, because the racing ones back in the 80s and 90s, those ones had really big wheel tubs because they had to accommodate those 18-inch wheels with those soft slick tires. But pretty much the issue is, let me show you. If you look inside, this right there hits the tire whenever I'm turning. So I don't want the front to be super high because I want a really low fitment. I'm pretty much aiming for the fitment of RWB Porsches. I'll put up some pictures on the screen. That is pretty much my main goal. And of course, once the whole car is finished, I got the suspension fully rebuilt, dialed in how I like it. The engine stuff is happening. Honestly, it's been a pretty big eyesore. I've been kind of staring at it a lot. And I'm really eager to start ordering the parts to rebuild the engine and then, swap it. But that's gonna have to wait. Because at the moment, we're waiting for some parts for my girlfriend's S63 AMG. We're pretty much rebuilding the cam phasers and the head bolts, which we already have some of the parts right here. Got the gaskets, got the diamond washers, got the head bolts with the new updated version. Oil filter, of course. This is the tool for the timing to remove the cams. Magnetic drain plug, some new spark plugs, your basic maintenance. That is extremely important. So the last thing we're waiting for are the cam phasers with the pin and the spring and stuff. So as soon as that comes in from Canada in about a week or so, we're going to pull this car in and start tearing down the top end of the engine. And hopefully we can make it in time to take this car to Canada, because we'll have a trip coming up here soon. But unfortunately, if this doesn't get finished in time, we'll have to take her smaller car, which is her E350. Because I would like to take my G-Wagon, but that gets like 12 miles per gallon, which is horrible. And I don't feel like driving that thing for about 30 hours. But as I was saying before, you can see right here my wonderful weld job that I did, thanks to the washer fluid tank rubbing through and creating a hole, and then also the tires rubbing through and causing this to rust away. But maybe for the time being, as soon as I install the suspension, and since I'm not swapping the engine right away, I might go ahead and make some incisions right here to create some openings for the wheel to fit. This side is going to be a lot more complicated just because there's a lot of wires and hoses and stuff. And the shady thing is, there's a lot of wires that are kind of exposed, so I would hate for the water to get inside. But that might be my best option if I still want to drive the car up until I get this thing out of here. And later on, I'm going to go ahead and cut all this out completely and weld in some nice big wheel tubs. Or it would be kind of cool to leave all of this open so it's exposed. That'd be really sick, but it's gonna suck because I'm going to street drive this car and it's not only going to be a track car. But to start, I'm gonna lift up the car, take the wheel off, and then take this nut off up top. Of course, the goal was to use these IRP adjustable ones. And the reason why I was actually eager to use these is because they have caster adjustment with these nuts up right here. Because you're supposed to run them either like this or like that. But if you look at mine, mine sits like this. So I can't really adjust the camber with this and then cast it with these, because there's this in the way right here, and I feel like it's gonna hit. But I'm gonna give these a shot, see if they actually work. So I might pop them off, but I might just have to use my old Silver Project ones, which there's nothing wrong with these ones. I do think I have more adjustment with this, but it is what it is. Here's what it looks like with the wheel completely off. Got my humongous adapters, my huge 333mm front rotors, and my Brembo big brakes. If you guys are curious how to do the swap or upgrade, check out my previous video. Also got some stainless steel braided brake line back here as well. But this is what I was talking about. A lot of these cars have issue with the wheel wells rubbing through. And you can see right here, still rubbing after beating the living crap out of it. So what I might do is just chop this piece off right here, up to here, and then a little bit right here. But all I have to do now is air down the bag, pop off the airline, take off the 2 bolts in the back, and one up here. And it's as easy as that. Okay, so got the bag fully aired down. Now we can go ahead and disconnect the airline. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take off the nut that's all the way up top. I'm gonna need to put an Allen key inside and hold the nut right there while I'm spinning it. But I did get the bag airline off and I got the bag out of the way. Now, another issue that I might have is these cups right here might be in the way of my coilover, because the spacing's pretty close. So we will have to see how close the spring and the perch is, because what I might have to do is actually cut this off completely. Not something I want to do, because I would like to go back to bags maybe one day, but I guess I can always weld the purchase back in. There we go. Yeah, and this coilover has served me pretty well. And you might think, this is just a shock. No, it's a coilover. I actually cut a lot of stuff off right here on the sides. I got these shipped from Germany, and these are actually for an E36, not for this car. Yeah, I think it's time I replace these. They're struggling. Okay, now we can go ahead and try to install the coilovers and see how they fit, or if I have any clearance issues. So I finally got the coilover installed. That was a complete pain in the ass. That literally took me over an hour to install, which it should have taken me like maybe 15 minutes or less. Very much had issues with the holes aligning. I did have this problem with these ones as well, but it's been a while since I've messed with these, and it looks like I did drill like a little bigger hole right here. But these should be like a direct fit from an E36 to 190e, but if you compare the thickness of the metal, there's a pretty big difference. Maybe that's what was causing my issues with this lining up, because this angle is like the same as this angle, but for some odd reason, whenever I bolt these two up, this would be like misaligned. The hole should be like right here, but this is where the hole was at. So I'm not running any washers in the back right now. I'm only doing this for like test reasons. Later on, I will really dial these down and maybe get a hole drilled a lot bigger. So right now I'm about to put the car down and see how the right side looks. But besides that, it looks pretty sick. I like the color combo. I still do have the original airline right here, which I'm just gonna have tucked away. And the fitment is pretty close over here. It's about a finger. So I'm gonna set the car down and see where this collar ends up, and then try tearing the wheel and see how close it gets to this. If not, I might get lucky and I might not have to cut this. But there is a bracket right here in the back, which is pretty close, so I might have to bend that out. It's this bracket right here, which on this one, I just cut it off. I cut off all the brackets right here. But this one, I don't really feel like cutting off, so I might just carefully bend it without breaking it. So here's one side done. As I mentioned before, I was having a bunch of issues with the front. I ended up putting some washers in between the camber plate and this top hat right here. I just put 2 of these washers in there to space it out so this piece right here wouldn't hit the camber plate. But as far as fitment, the front looks pretty decent. I could go a little lower. As far as the rear, I think it's perfect in my opinion. I've not taken the car for a test drive just yet, so I'll have to do the other side sometime this week and take it for a spin. I really hope that it doesn't actually rub like it did with the bags. If anything, I might just have to raise them up just a tiny bit and hopefully they'll fix the issue. But the fitment looks pretty good. That is pretty much exactly what I want. I will be going with like much meatier tires in the back. I'll be going with like a 315, 35, 17. So I'm gonna have to trim my fenders just a little bit more so I can clear the wider tires. Hello everyone, this is the second day of trying to install the coilovers. I got one side done, looks pretty decent. Hopefully this side doesn't take as long because I know what I'm doing. And I might go ahead and drill these holes a bit bigger before actually putting them in. And same thing for these holes right here. Now the main difference between this coilover and the previous one that I had before is the quality. The other one is much cheaper metals, thinner metals. So it's actually easier to drill the holes and bend this bracket out just a little bit so it can clear easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing with this one. The metal is much thicker, a lot thicker actually. So that's why it's so hard to fit these ones into the car. I do think if I would have gotten like the actual 190e ones, this wouldn't be an issue, but this is what you get for trying to retrofit parts that don't technically belong in your car. All right, so I got the car finally on the ground after messing with it for a couple of hours. This is the final fitment that I have dialed in. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and move my girlfriend's S63 out of the way, pull my Mercedes out and take it for a quick little spin around town, and then try to see how the suspension behaves, especially in the front and in the rear with the new springs that I have. I do currently have the KW set to almost fully on stiff. Once I come back, I'm gonna mess with the knob some more and maybe back off a couple of notches if the ride is too harsh. But as soon as I come back and I am somewhat happy with the results, that's when the actual rebuild starts. I'm gonna jack the whole car up on the ground and probably going to start with the front by removing the control arms, links, and everything like that. All right, so I just came back from the drive that I took. Try to push the car as hard as I could around the turns, and honestly, the KWs feel really good. The car feels very stiff, it's very responsive, and they handle it really well around the corners with their wonderful potholes. Now the rear also felt pretty good with the springs, but they still kind of rub and bottom out whenever I go over like really big bumps. But I think the issue with that is the bushings are completely shot and dry rotted, so they're literally doing nothing. So I feel like once I put in the actual Delrin and polyurethane ones, the car's gonna handle a lot better. So yeah, this is what the current fitment's gonna be like. I would like to go a little lower, of course, and if the new bushings will allow me to, I definitely will. And I feel like once I cut the wheel wells in the front and actually tub them, like the Evo 2s and Evo 1s are, I feel like I'll definitely be able to go much lower in the front for that perfect fitment. But right now it looks about the same as it did when I was on bags, so this is most likely going to be a two-part video. The first part's going to be me completely removing all of the suspension, and then the second part is going to be me installing all of this goodness. I do feel like this is going to take me a week or two just to install all of this properly, and I also still have to get a bushing tool to easily remove these. I might get a hydraulic one that I can actually just pump for the bushing to pop out, instead of the ones where you have to use an impact and stuff and a wrench on them. Those seem like a pain in the ass, to be honest. And then as soon as all the suspension's installed, I dialed in the fitment and everything else about the suspension. Next up, I am going to start collecting parts for my M104 that I picked up a few weeks ago. Of course, the engine is in a very rough shape and it's gonna need a lot of cleaning. And you can also see right here how much gunk there is from all the years of it leaking. So I'm gonna have to put the engine outside and then power wash it. And I already do have a few parts planned out. For example, I'll be getting the T Motorsport intake manifold, and then either Kangaroo or T Motorsport exhaust manifold for the turbo and stuff. I'll have to have a custom downpipe made as well. And I'll also go ahead and replace all of these pulleys, you know, the belts and stuff like that. And obviously all of the gaskets, especially the head gasket and head studs. And I feel like the final piece is gonna be me getting the valve cover powder coated. I haven't decided what color I'm going to go with. Of course, part of me wants to do silver just because silver looks amazing in almost everything. Or I could just do normal black to match the outside of the car. Or it would be really cool if I did like a chrome one that's like really shiny and reflective, which I could take this apart and actually polish it myself to save some money. But time will tell on what I end up doing with the engine as far as the color combination. Okay, so day 2 is over, and I'll see you guys the next day. Alright, welcome back. This is day 3, and I got the car up on the jacks in the front. I'll do the rear as soon as I completely remove the front end, and I'm going to go ahead and start tearing the whole car down. So first things first, I'm going to remove the adapters, the rotors, the calipers, of course the coilover, camber plates, my sway bar links, control arms, and everything like that. I might get the wheel knuckle powder coated, so I'm gonna fully take everything apart, remove the wheel bearing, and as soon as I get it back, I'm gonna put the wheeler bearing back in and assemble everything from there. Alright, so let's do a little recap. On this side, majority of stuff is off. I got the caliper hanging by the zip tie. I literally just dropped the sway bar. Now on this side, this ball joint is being a complete pain in the ass. I did end up using the fork to try to hammer it out. On the left side, it worked, but on this side, it's being a pain. There's the knuckle, put the wheel hub. So as you can see, the ball joint looks a lot better on this side. This one came out a lot easier. So right now, I'm in the process of removing the control arm bolts to drop the control arm. All right, good morning guys. I had to use this PB blaster yesterday because this ball joint was seized up really bad. But what I had to do was actually zip tie this knuckle to the camber plate up top, so that way I had some sort of leverage, and I was actually able to hammer the piss out of the control arm to release the ball joint. So this side is also almost done. All I have to do now is just remove the zip tie, control arm bolts, drop the control arm, and then I'm going to attempt to remove the bushings with my bushing press tool that I picked up from Harbor Freight. I picked this one up just for now to try it out, and if it's not good enough, I'm gonna get the hydraulic one. which I can actually use with this kit, because the hydraulic one is actually used to like punch holes into metal, but I'm actually able to use that tool with these cups right here, because I don't want to use it on my new control arms, my new bushings, and then potentially ruin these ones. But once I get all the bushings out, putting in the polyurethane ones and the Delrin ones will be really easy. Okay, so I got the whole car up in the air, but earlier I was messing with the tools that I got to remove the bushings from my new control arms, and honestly it's a complete pain just because I don't have the right cups. The cups that came in the kit that I ordered aren't correct. This one's a little too small and this one's a little too big. So I can't really push these bushings out right now. I'm waiting for a new kit to come in from Amazon. I did make this little contraption right here with this long bolt that goes through. And then there's this bolt right here with this hydraulic press that's meant to punch holes. You pretty much take this threaded piece inside, you thread it in. Of course you want to put your cup in the middle right here. And whenever you pump the handle like this punch piece starts pulling back. And this should pull this bushing out with ease. Which I did try, but of course the bushing cup that I have, it sits right on this and it pretty much pinches this bushing. Doesn't really do me any good. But as far as the front, the control arms are out, the knuckles and stuff, that wasn't too bad. But right now I'm gonna go ahead and start with the rear. First thing I'm gonna do is remove the adapters, hang the calipers, remove the rotors, loosen up the shock and the trunk, and remove the sway bar links right here, loosen those up. Then I'm going to move to the exhaust, take the exhaust off, which I might have to cut, and then take off the drive shaft. Okay, so I got the rotors removed. Now we can go ahead and remove these links right here by removing this nut and the one up top right here as well. And after I remove this sway bar link, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the nuts that are up top that are holding this shock. Now it's a good idea to put the old bolts back in where they came from, so that way it's easier to match them up, since I have a bag of new hardware for all my components. Now I'm sure some of you can easily match these up, but I prefer to be safe than sorry. Now we can go to the other side and do the same thing. Alright, so we got the links removed. Now it's time to remove my BC Racing coilovers in the back. I just have to remove the knob and loosen up the nuts. And then I can go ahead and drop them down. Now, I do have this air suspension set up, and I low-key kind of want to keep it just because it looks so good. But I'm going to have to get rid of all of this. And don't ask me if this is for sale, because it's not. In the future, I might get another 190e, and I might put backs on it. Okay, so I got the shocks removed. I got the springs removed. All that's left is to remove the exhaust, drive shaft, fuel lines, and then the subframe will be ready to come down. Now the issue is, my exhaust is a hole-in-one piece. A few years ago I had a full custom stainless steel one made, but it was a 3-inch one and it was straight piped. Now that got annoying real quick after a good year or two. So then I went with a more subtle setup with a pretty nice muffler to quiet down the noise, and then of course I went to a smaller size pipe. And I'm gonna have to actually cut it somewhere probably in the straightest area, so that way whenever I put it back on, I can put on a clamp for the meantime before I have a fully custom one made once I swap the engine. So yeah, let's go ahead and cut this bad boy off, take it down, and move on. Okay, so update time. I got the exhaust cut off right there. The exhaust is no longer here. Next up, you have to remove this rear sensor that's in the fucking god. Alright, so up next, you have to remove the sensor that's in the rear differential. Pulling the sensor was actually kind of a pain. It looks to be crooked on the inside, so I might have to get a replacement, potentially. So up next, I'm gonna have to go up top and disconnect some wires. And as soon as I finish that, we can probably go ahead and remove the drive shaft. Okay, now let me show you what you have to do next. So what you just saw was me removing the 3 bolts on the drive shaft. You can see which ones are removed right there. Make sure you put your car neutral so that way you can spin the drive shaft around. And also make sure you plug in the hole right there where the sensor goes. So I have to remove the cover to give us a little more space. There's the e-brake assembly right there. It's kind of hard to show you guys, but I'll do my best. So, first thing you want to do, remove the spring that's connected like this. So you remove that first, pull that out. Then what you want to do is remove this bolt right here, remove these clips right here on each side for each caliper. Then you can go ahead and pull these off on both sides, and the cable should be free. So once that is done, since we got the cover off, so what you want to do first is remove this one right here. Take this hose out. Once you take it out, pop it off and make sure you have a bucket on hand. Remove this main hose right here that goes to the fuel tank. And then after all that's done, the fuel's drained, we can go ahead and take off the subframe. Hello guys, welcome back. It's the next morning, and after cleaning up the garage a little bit, because it was an absolute mess from using a bunch of different tools to take the suspension apart. And just to show you, here's the rear subframe. Like I said before, I already had these camber arms installed a few years ago, which they are due for a rebuild because you see all the surface rust right here. And like I said before, I didn't realize that my axle boot blew up, so I got axle grease everywhere. So after looking at my subframe, I'm pretty sure I'll have to get some new axles just because. And once I have the knuckles fully taken apart, I'll get them powder coated, get them fully redone. And also I'll need new hardware for the subframe bushing mounts. And can't forget about the brake cables as well, because while you're in there, you may as well. But I was having issues with pulling out the subframe yesterday because of this differential mount right here. I guess it was pretty rusty. That's why I had issues pulling it out. So you kind of have to like yank on it back and forth and try to pry it off. And I also have the drive shaft on the jack stand. There's the fuel lines right there that get fed right here and go under it. Which whenever I pulled the fuel line off yesterday, the main one from the gas tank, a bunch of fuel started squirting out, like a ton. So having a vapor respirator really helps. But this is the very last bit of the video. Next video is going to be me disassembling the rear diff, all the control arms, axles, wheel bearings, and removing the bushings from the new control arms and the old ones just for practice before I damage the new ones that I have, because that would suck to ruin those ones. And of course, give a little bit of a clean to my DC Racing rear shocks from an M3, which honestly, I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest. I kind of want to go with KW, but I'm not trying to spend over $1,000 in some 3-way adjustable coilovers. But yeah, next few videos is going to be me mainly cleaning the chassis, making some incisions in the wheel wells to make more space, and then disassembling every suspension component and then drop it off to get powder coated. And then a couple of videos after that, it'll be me assembling all the suspension components and putting it on the car. There's the old scanning swipe bar, which I have a thick replacement for that. And for the exhaust, like I said before, meanwhile, I'll have to get the exhaust clamp that clamps the one I cut off before I have a fully custom one made. But inspecting the underside right here, it honestly doesn't look too bad. There's literally no rust, which is amazing, and it makes things a lot easier for me. I just have to clean off the grease and all the grime over the years. And maybe eventually I might do a spare tire delete and put a fuel cell in there, if I end up going that far with my build. But once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.